David Hawke. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to make a submission and speak in support of our written submission. And as an association, we certainly appreciate the importance of this process because it's going to set the ground rules that we're all going to be working under for the next little while. We had our regular meeting, monthly meeting last night, and one of the things that we talked about is that something that's not really been addressed in the current proposal is the choice between an at-large and a ward-based council. And there's a long-standing body of theory in local government politics around representation structure, and that says that ward-based councils make decisions that don't have the interests of the whole city at heart. And worse than that, that the representatives from the various wards engage in horse trading between themselves to advance their own ideas. But in our opinion, this has not been the case in Christchurch, and largely to this group's credit, I think. From what we can see, council at both political and officer level have worked in the interests of the whole city and not just particular localities. And there's now a strong body of evidence coming forward in support of the ward system, especially where there's an underpinning committee system like that we now have in Christchurch. If we think now of the size of council and community boards, and it's really interesting listening to the two earlier submitters, there's a couple of observations that we would like to make from our submission. Firstly, that the current number of councillors are overworked. And secondly, that the existing Rickett and Wigram Community Board has worked well for us in Halswell. In terms of overworked councillors, our view is just on our general observations. It's really hard to pin something down, but it does seem to us that it's probably a bit of a byproduct of the committee structure that I've just talked about, but it's something that we really feel that councillors really do have their work cut out for them. I've got a note here that the Minister for Earthquake Recovery says that you're overworked, and so I suppose that's good enough for us.
What? I don't think I've seen that quote.
Did you email it round?
Yeah.
Can you send it to us?
He said, he was quoted in the press. Yeah. In terms of working well, three things come to our view. Firstly, we're able to take issues directly to the community board through the delegation system. And when we get there, something that's really important is that the board has sufficient local knowledge to know that we're talking about. An example that we would have is that there's a long-standing need for a youth facility in Halswell. We've run several delegations to community board, and they know exactly where we're coming from and exactly the situation we're talking about. Second example of working well is that community boards are able to take our issues to council officers and get action. An example here was the incomplete project at the end of Templeton's Drive, where the cycle lane was covered over by road cones for what seemed like months awaiting sealing. I emailed on behalf of Halswell Residents Association and nothing happened. Debbie Mora from our community board chased us up and got an answer immediately where the inquiry system had failed. The third example of the community board working well for us is that councillors on the community board are able to escalate issues if necessary, again with all important local knowledge. And an example here has been the status of toilets in Halswell Domain, where Councillor Chen helped out and he got an immediate answer for us from a senior council officer, which was really helpful to our association. As we note in our submission, too many community boards and the voice at council level and with council officers gets diluted. Too few has the potential to obscure the link with communities. So we think that the proposal is roundabout right. In terms of boundaries, as we've stated in our submission, we totally agree that Halswell should have its own ward. A strength of the ward system is that it allows local voices to be heard. And because of its rapid growth in recent years and growth that is expected to continue, Halswell needs to have a voice to bring these growth-related issues directly to the council table. It's really important to note, I think, that when you have an area of rapid growth, you do tend to have more issues that crop up, and these typically need political intervention. A dedicated ward will help our voice to be heard, but as we noted above, we don't think that this will be to the detriment of citywide decision making. The issue that we have with the boundaries, and again this has been really interesting listening to the two earlier submitters, is that the proposed population size and boundary make Halswell one of the biggest wards on both population and area counts, whereas it should be among the smallest because of the inevitable inaccuracy associated with a system based on the previous census. The 2013 census, I'm sure, is already out of date, and by the time we get to the next representation review, it will be quite laughable. So I know that there's only a limited amount of slop in the system in terms of the population size that you're, variability that you're allowed, but we think, even so, that our ward should be smaller, not at the size that it is. So that is what I've tried to summarise. I've tried to summarise what we've got in our written submission, and we'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. Jimmy.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question regarding to the boundary and also the small ward you particularly mentioned, because Halswell is the most faster growth population area. But yesterday and today they have some of the submission. One is regarding to the Westmoreland. Some people might suggest to shift from the probably Halswell ward to the Kashmir ward. That's the first one. Second is just earlier, the people on behalf of the group of people, particularly suggest around 60 people, a moment living in Hawke. But definitely based on the proposed, in the Halswell, whether, to shift to the kind of spreading ward, etc. So what is your point of view?
Okay, so if we take the first one,
yes.
About Westmoreland, it's quite interesting because when we were discussing this at our association, I said, this was my personal view.
Yeah.
I said, Westmoreland, they're more obviously with Kashmir. And there was this uproar. and apparently, it was before my time with the association, we had comments from Westmoreland residents that they certainly did not see themselves as part of Kashmir.
Okay.
I don't know anyone in Westmoreland who's expressed an opinion, and you'd have to go and ask them. But that was the view that was taken. And the second one about that's really interesting, because one of the things that's coming up is the new subdivision or development at Meadowlands, which is on the southern side of Henderson's Road. What you inevitably have is you've got to draw a line somewhere, and where that line goes, I don't know. Debbie Mora, who's on the community board, lives on our side of Henderson's Road. Whether the boundary is naturally down the middle of Henderson's Road or on the south side of Henderson's Road is a bit of a hard one to judge. And again, I think that there are so many opinions on that it's hard for us as an association to make a viewpoint. In terms of these sort of natural dividing lines, there is an age-related dividing line in terms of how long-standing the particular development has been, and in that regard, Henderson's Road is definitely Hoon-Hay. But when you think of what's going to go into Meadowlands, maybe they'll turn around and look south rather than look to the centre of the town. To us, one of the major dividing lines is previous speakers talked about the Heathcote River. Another really major dividing line is actually the motorway. But the motorway is, if we chopped off on the south-eastern side of the motorway, well, that would make Halswell far too small.
Yeah.
So that this whole community of interest thing it's a bit fraught. But I suppose the other thing in terms of where, communities of interest lie, Halswell people, their local high school, their in-zone high school is Hill Morton High School. So people in Halswell do look toward the Hoon-Hay area as well. So probably haven't really answered your question, but I guess the main thing is that it is quite fraught, and how you define a community of interest is quite an interesting question, but yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Tim,
Thank you, and thank you very much for your submission. I did talk with the chair of the Westmoreland Residents Association a wee while ago about a different issue, but he assured me that he felt that they were Halswell rather than Kashmir. So,
Yeah.
But there wasn't any ruckus or anything.
Yeah.
Just with regards to the previous speakers, the corner of Henderson's and Sparks Road, there's a dog leg there where part of it's in Halswell and part of it's still in Halswell. And I was just thinking your thoughts on, for say want of a better term, just to tidy things up, that those that are inside that corner but are in Halswell do feel, we've heard that felt that they're part of Hoon Hay. So do you see an issue or a major issue with regards to just reversing that line?
No, not really. No. One of the things inevitably is that in an area where things are growing quickly,
yes,
and the focus of our association has been much more in the growth areas, so that established areas tend to miss out a bit, I suppose.
Yeah.
And in some respects, again, this is not, we haven't talked about the dog leg at our association,
Yeah.
but you can see that there would be advantages with those people going with the Hoon Hay side of things, because of they aren't going to get the level of input probably from a more problem-based approach to things, where we end up going around putting out fires a lot of the time.
Cheers, thank you.
Yeah.
you raise an issue that I think is of significant importance, and that's the population basis for the ward based on the 2013 census, and the fact that Halswell has grown since then and actually will continue to grow on projections in terms of developments that are going to be occurring in that area. And it does raise some issues around, again, the appropriateness of doing this at this time, because it is hard to know where we're going to be, and if we're going to be reviewing this in 6 years' time, we actually can do it in 3 years' time, but why would we change all the wards and then change them all again next time when we have some better figures? I mean, it's just a rant, really. I haven't really got a question that goes with it.
Well, I guess my response to that would be is you can't fix things in one hit.
No.
And if you look at the way that the boundaries are going to be in Christchurch, I think they're going to be changing, present continuous tense, for the next 20 years at least.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to seize the opportunities that we have. Yep. And certainly for the status quo, I think people in Halswell would feel very hard done by. But I think one of the real strengths of the current proposal is that we do get a local representative to bring our concerns to the council table.
Yeah.
So you're feeling quite sort of as to use the language of the Act, it's an isolated community in that regard, because you're just that distance removed and don't have a single representative to call your own.
Yeah, and it's an accident of democracy at the moment, but neither of the councillors, Councillor Chen and Deputy Mayor Buck, are resident in our ward, and
Halswell, you mean?
Yeah, in Halswell, sorry, wrong way, sorry, Ricky.
In their part of the ward. They are absolutely embedded in the ward itself.
Right.
We all know.
Yeah,
there is no one who would doubt who Councillor Chen and Councillor Buck represent.
Absolutely. My apologies for that. But yes, and I think, in terms of community board members, Debbie Mora is only in by the skin of her teeth.
Right.
An accident of one side of the road or the other, and
Okay.
And the other community board members don't come from Halswell. And as I say, it's an accident of democracy, but we do feel that our representation has been, it's certainly not to cast aspersions at any of the
No,
existing
and but the
representatives,
thing is that what you're doing is highlighting the, you know, the significance of the growth that's occurring out there at a time where we've got a structure that was designed for an earlier time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Glenn.
Thank you. Thank you, David. I've been looking into your the bullet points about whether or not we're overworked, because there's a sense in which we like
Oi,
fishing.
I said don't mention that.
What's that? Overworked.
It's got nothing to do with the decision that we made.
All right then, I'll look at the Palmerston North City Council has 15 councillors plus a mayor for a population of 78,000. It hasn't had a major event as we have. So do you have any comments over that compared to this proposal of 16 plus a mayor for 400,000 people?
I spent about 6 or 7 years in Palmerston North. Other than a light-hearted comment that I was glad to leave. The issues that they have, I think, the issues that they have, I think, in some ways is quite similar to Christchurch. They're a very dispersed urban area. I would have been surprised if they needed 17, but yeah, I guess it's, well, I think again, if we come back to what I said earlier in response to the Mayor, you know, we fix things little by little rather than hitting things in one go. And to me, moving from 13 councillors to 16 councillors and seeing how that goes at the next representation review is a really good way of looking at it, rather than necessarily going and having a look at, you know, places like Palmerston North or wherever, and seeing, you know, can we be guided by them? So my response to that is, you know, let's ignore Palmerston North and let's sort of move things step by step with the system that we've got.
Right. I was trying to find a way around using the term overworked, so that's why I drew on that comparison.
Yeah, well, there's a joke that goes, you know you're from Christchurch when Palmerston North sounds like a good idea. Anyway, so
my town of origin is Palmerston North. I'll tell you that later.
don't want to be mean about Palmerston North, but there you go. And I'm sure the Mayor of Palmerston North will be on the phone as soon as he finds out that that's what I've said. Anyway, look, thank you very much for your contribution. It's actually been incredibly helpful and certainly has helped me understand some issues better than perhaps I did before, so that's great. Thank you very much. Now, we're going to adjourn the meeting.